In this episode, I am joined by Jensen Martin, a scholar-practitioner and PhD student at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. Jensen recalls how his childhood experiences playing the World of Warcraft and reading fantasy books awakened a deep longing for real experiences of magic and shamanism. How spiritual biographies inspired him to become a live-in member of the Self Realisation Fellowship, and how trips to India drew him towards the practice of bhakti. Jensen recounts powerful spiritual visions of Narasiṃha and Egyptian gods, transformative darśanas with Indian gurus such as Amma the Hugging Saint, and experiments with the power of mantra recitation. Jensen also describes his deep dive into psychedelic use, reveals his extensive experience with ayahuasca, and details his journey to a full scholarship PhD at the Graduate Theological Union. So without further ado, Jensen Martin. Jensen Martin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm so delighted that you're able to join me. And when you reached out to me by email, in fact, telling me a bit about your story, I was immediately fascinated. You're a PhD student at GTU, Graduate Theological Union, in Berkeley, focusing on Narasiṃha.
Narasiṃha, yeah.
Narasiṃha.
This is one of the 10 classical avatars of Vishnu. So, Simha meaning lion, Nara usually translated as man-lion. So this is the man-lion form of Vishnu, who's, Rama, Krishna, that kind of thing. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. And actually, your PhD studies have sprung from a deep personal devotion and quest, really, journey. And so I'd like to start there, if we might. So could you say something, just to set the context, a little bit about your family of origin? What kind of childhood did you have, and how was it you became interested in these things?
Sure. So, I was not raised in any kind of religious background. I grew up in Southern California, San Diego County, fairly ordinary environment. And, as a kid, I was really interested in fantasy. Lord of the Rings. I was a great, voracious reader, all kinds of Harry Potter, elaborate world building, all kinds of, I always would bring a book to school and fantasize about wizards and magical powers and how I would someday ever be able to have those myself. And later on, it was actually through playing a video game. Maybe some people have heard of it. It's called World of Warcraft, but basically, my favorite character was this shaman character who could call on the power of the elements and the ancestors, to summon, powers to help fight in battle. And this archetype actually activated something inside of myself, and I found myself kind of like daydreaming about this archetype, throughout the day, in school, fantasizing about being a shaman, and then that led me to researching shamanism, and discovering, oh my goodness, people actually do this. Like this was, in some cultures, people were actually having these kinds of, ancestral out-of-body experiences. And so that kind of instilled in me the possibility, if there's any way that I could activate this within myself, that's what I would like to do. And so it was kind of one thing after the other, and that kind of set the foundation for me to read Paramahansa Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi when I was 17, and that turned everything around because he was the first one to present kind of supernatural experiences, but alongside a formula of how to get them yourself. Because up until that time, all the books on shamanism and stuff that I'd read had just been other people's experiences, but not really a definite method by which I could have those, But Yogananda presented something through this Kriya Yoga technique, which was like, oh, okay, so that's how it happens. And so that kind of was a very significant transition period.
I wonder what other books you read at that time. You said you'd read other books where people have been having shamanic experiences and so on. Could you give us a sense of the wider reading you were doing at that time?
Man, it feels kind of like a while ago, but basically go to the bookstore and look in the section of shamanism. I think there was a couple like animal spirit medicine, stuff in that kind of like Native American, because I was interested in connecting with the land. So being from California, I was interested in the kind of indigenous cultures. So, yeah, stuff like animal totemism was really interesting for me. And since a lot of shamanic culture has to do with ancestral worship, I come from a Scandinavian background, so I was also interested in like Viking mythology, the rune system of Odin, and learning as much as I could about that tradition. If you're familiar with it, I was particularly interested in the berserker tradition, how they would go into these trance states in battle, and, how that was accomplished in the cosmology. And yeah, it was interesting. And so I actually circled back to that later on, after I'd studied yoga for some years, because I felt like there were some parallels, but, that's another conversation.
Well, I hope we'll get there, actually. I think I know what you're hinting at. You mentioned that this curiosity, which later became a life's passion, was awakened reading fantasy books and playing World of Warcraft. And, some people look at those kinds of mediums, fantasy books and computer games and so on, as kind of a waste of time, not very stimulating, intellectually, certainly not necessarily spiritually, particularly something like World of Warcraft, doesn't have that reputation, does it, really, as being a spiritually or intellectually stimulating thing. But for you, it evidently awakened a deep spiritual longing, but also now you're working on your PhD, a rigorous intellectual journey as well. Do you have any reflections on the role those mediums played in your life at that time?
I mean, everything is kind of like a mixed character, It depends on I was blessed in the structure that I had at that time. Without going into too much backstory, life story, background, my parents had separated, and so they were living in different places. One parent's house had internet access where I could play video games. The other parent's house did not, and was living in the more natural area. And so what kind of happened is I would be at one house where I was playing the game nonstop, and then I would be forced to go to the other house, and I was kind of like starving for this game again. Well, actually, that was an essential part of the training, because if I had been able to do what I wanted and get to play the game the whole time, I don't think I would have actually connected the wires within myself. But because of this kind of like forced deprivation of the video games, it forced me to develop that kind of inner fantasy, because I was starving to kind of experience myself as this shaman archetype. And so it led me into this kind of like daydream consciousness. And so I guess I would just say it's not black or white, but anything in the extreme is usually not healthy, so in the extreme, the video games, the fantasy books, it can lead to not really being grounded in reality, or, whatever, especially the screens, don't get me started on that. But in low doses, it can be very developmentally positive. But I think really it kind of comes down to karma, if you have the karma to awaken, you're gonna awaken. It doesn't matter what situation you're in. It's the design of your environmental context is gonna awaken you somehow. And so for me, it just happened to be through this patterning, but it could have, had I been born into in another culture, another environment that didn't have those video games to stimulate me, it would have been something else, it would have been a story that I heard by chance, or, who knows. So that's my take on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's a very interesting distinction. When you started to get into that kind of daydream consciousness that you talked about, I've sometimes heard people say in certain shamanic approaches, this sort of consciousness, one learns to navigate it, even to journey through it. I've heard that sort of thing mentioned before. Did you have any experiences or encounters at this time that led you deeper? Or is this period characterized predominantly by just a tremendous hunger for that?
Yeah, well, basically, when I started to get into the shamanism stuff, before I read the Yogananda's autobiography, there was a period of about, I would say, 6 months to a year, where I was really practicing lucid dreaming. And so I don't know if I ever actually accomplished a lucid dream, but what I did do was get in the habit of recording my dreams. And so I'd wake up throughout the night and, record 4 to 5 dreams every night. And this practice, I didn't continue it for very long, but this got me paying attention to my subconscious dream mind. And my attempts to step into that, I think, were rewarded. I wouldn't say that I became comfortable navigating that realm, but I was interested. I mentioned earlier animal totemism. I was quite fascinated. It's quite connected to the hawks, red-tailed hawks, and I was reading Joseph Campbell. Oh, there we go. Some other philosophy I'd forgot. So Joseph Campbell, and I was really interested in these kind of hawk connected to falcon head god Ra from ancient Egypt, maybe, Egyptian past life kind of thing. And, so anytime that I would see the hawks, I would, kind of do a little thing to them, a little pranam. And then in the dreams, when I would dream of the hawks, I considered it an auspicious omen, And so none of it really made sense. I mean, it wasn't coherent enough. And so I knew that I didn't quite have all of the pieces of the puzzle that I needed. And so this hunger was developing at the time. I said, okay, this lucid dream thing is interesting, but I need a little bit more. Like, I want a teacher, I wanted to meet the guru or something. At the time, I didn't have a concept of the guru. But yeah, that's kind of the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. And so, having read Paramahansa Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi, what happened next? How did you apply this?
I mean, so almost immediately it introduced me to some main characters, particularly Yogananda's conception of God. And so this is unique from the conventional Christian concept of God. Yogananda's idea of God was kind of a little bit more like ecumenical, like all traditions fall under the same umbrella. And so Yogananda said, look, I'm promising techniques of meditation that are scientific, and so it doesn't matter what you believe, it doesn't matter what religion you subscribe to, the final enlightenment moments, the ultimate mystical experiences all are more or less the same. And so regardless of your background, you can have these experiences. So I was really into that because at the time of reading the book, I kind of considered myself a pagan, either a Norse pagan or something of a shaman. So I didn't want to be identified with Christianity. I definitely didn't want to be identified with Hinduism. And I just wanted to have the ultimate enlightenment experiences. So, I applied myself pretty rigorously to the meditation techniques as I was able. And I didn't have any like mind-blowing enlightenment experiences, but what I did have was just enough, enough of a glimpse of kind of a still mind or energy moving in my body, or, a dream here or there of something that felt significant at the time. And so all of this kind of together prompted me to move up to Northern California, to Humboldt State, which is characterized by these old-growth redwood trees and, a school that is surrounded by forest that comes right down by the ocean. So all of this was kind of, it all kind of happened at the same time. I read Yogananda's Autobiography, and then I put myself in a young adult context that was more nature based, a place where I could kind of explore my fantasy of being some kind of like mountain yogi. So, I mean, I could take hours and tell you the whole story, but basically, I continued. I was really dead set on experiencing, what Yogananda called like God consciousness, Christ consciousness, the Sanskrit, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and I more or less avoided the typical, I would say, American upbringing, except for experimenting with marijuana, which played a huge part in my development. And so I would say that I didn't ever become like a long-term habitual user, but one of my early experiences of cannabis was, I was at my friend's house, and I remembered kind of going into a state where I felt like I was outside of creation. I think we were sitting in the dark listening to music or something, and I sat kind of in a meditation position and felt all of creation existing outside of my awareness. And it introduced me to this idea that awareness could be beyond creation. And so that was kind of, I didn't really ever become too attached to the cannabis as the means to get to that space, but I was just really interested that the mind could make a sudden leap like that experientially. So yeah, I went through the college experiences. I took a year off in the middle to go live at the ashram for the Yogananda tradition, the Self Realisation Fellowship. So I lived in a quite disciplined monastic environment where we were doing, at least 4 hours a day of meditation and learning the techniques. And I had monastic counselors available, and so I was in that for a year. That was in the middle of my education, and I was quite serious about becoming a monk. And when I asked them about doing that, they basically said, well, you can, but finish school first. So I was really reluctant because I had not really enjoyed the school environment. I felt like it was too limiting for me. The professors were putting me in a box. I just wanted to meditate and explore, shamanic topics. But when I went back, I ended up basically in religious studies. That was not my major at the beginning, which I had declared as philosophy. And so religious studies became the perfect container for me. And at that school, a quite liberal school, we were kind of allowed to research whatever we want. So I did this awesome final paper on monastic life and went to all of these different monasteries and ashrams and interviewed all these monks. And it was a deep experience for me, and I made a lot of valuable connections. And right as I was getting ready to join the, basically wrap up and join the ashram, I ended up doing a final study abroad in India, and then that kind of shifted everything, because in the Autobiography of a Yogi, if you're reading that as, a boy, you have a fantasy about what India is, but when you get there in person, it's quite different, And so that first trip was actually 9 months. I went there and did a semester of school and then did another 5 months of travel. And that really changed something, because that's kind of what introduced me to this, the bhakti, the devotion tradition, but really kind of like this magical way of thinking that is unique in India. This idea that this mountain behind your house, it's not just a mountain, it's where Hanuman was born. It's where Shiva came down and placed this linga. It's where Krishna performed this feat. And that was something that I had been kind of looking for my whole life through those fantasy books. And so I kind of finally found that a little bit in India. And so it was a blast. I mean, it was challenging. I got sick, and, it was a mess in certain ways, but it was really a deep eye-opener into what it would be like to think about life in a different kind of way, So yeah, I mean, see, that was like college, India. Yeah. So then, I came back and I kind of struggled. I was like, what do I do now? I graduated from college with this degree in religious studies. I'd spent 9 months in India and wasn't quite sure how to integrate it. You know, so I had a girl, I ended up with a girlfriend at the time, and I was living with her and trying to work different jobs, and I was trying to apply this magical way of thinking to my environment, at the time, Northern California. So I was trying to see places like the mountains and the forest as like, well, maybe Shiva came here, maybe Hanuman came here, but I didn't quite have there's no like really history to really apply that, so it kind of felt like I was, just kind of in a yogic fantasy, and the pressures of like real adulthood, like you got to make money, were starting to come. And so I made the decision to start this master's degree in yoga studies, which at the time was, I think, the first master's degree program in the country. This is in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount. And so the idea was that somehow through this 2-year program, I would develop the skills of, something that would turn me into like a yoga master that I could make a living off of. And yeah, that was quite a big decision. So yeah, I can just keep telling the story, but if you want to interrupt on anything, feel free.
I am curious if you had any, I suppose you probably had quite a few, if you can remember one or two, experiences whilst inhabiting this new worldview. It sounds like in India you were able to enter, you've called it a sort of magical thinking approach.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And presumably that came along with it certain kinds of ways of experiencing the world and encounters of various types that you've been hungering for, and you recognize that. So I'm curious if you can recall any particularly memorable experiences along those lines, either in India or indeed when you came back to the States.
It never really happened the way that I wanted it. This kind of thirst for the magical experiences was kind of like the carrot on the stick to keep me going. I never quite clicked with it. I believed that it was possible, but that kind of dramatic magical display, like, oh, a vision of this, or like a full body Kundalini awakening or something like that. I always wanted it, and I was kind of like searching for it, but it never quite happened that way. However, there was the constant magical present experience of kind of, you could say, like synchronicity. Like there was a near constant effortless flow of like one thing to the next, and there were so many experiences that I can't even begin to recall them all, like where we missed the bus in India, and then it's like, oh my God, like what do I do? And then something else happens, and then like something completely random outside of my control puts me on a different bus, and I get to my destination fine. Something like that, or somebody leads me to this temple, or some chance thing unfolds in this kind of unexpected way. And so like, I remember, I can share, like, this is after my India trip. I was living in Northern California, and I was really, I needed a job, and so I don't know what to do. I don't have any skills. I have a religious studies degree, and I'm interested in meditation, and, and I'm a little bit avoidant of actual hard work. So I remember doing this like 3-hour meditation session, and at the end, I was like, okay, listen up. I need a job, like, listen, Divine Mother, Yogananda, I need a job. And I said, I'll do anything, just whatever it takes to be of service, I'll even dig ditches for you. And so, I put a text message out to my circle of friends, and one of my friends, who happened to be a Yogananda practitioner, said, well, I don't have any real work, but I do have a ditch that needs to be dug. And I could just feel it. It was like, oh, okay, so that's, I got to make good on what I said. So I went, I dug this ditch, 4 hours of hard work. And then I got back home and I opened the job board on the internet, and I'd been sending out applications for weeks to all kinds of stuff. They hadn't even really called me back. And the first thing that came up, it was like baker at like whatever, and something in me was like, yeah, you're going to get that job. You listen, you said you'll dig the ditch. You went and dig the ditch. Now, as a result of that, you've created the merit. You apply to this job, you're going to get it. And sure enough, I got the job. And I didn't last very long there. And the point was not, you're going to be a baker now. The point was following that thread of kind of synchronicities, So if I can do my daily practice and stay kind of attuned, if I can keep myself listening to the flow of what I'm supposed to do, then things are going to happen for you, one thing, in the way that they need. And sure enough, I would never have considered going to my master's degree program. I had absolutely zero interest in academia. I wanted to be a forest-dwelling yogi and, subsist on roots and berries and air, as much as possible. But that's just not grounded in reality. And so I was able, at least enough, to recognize that I was not grounded in reality. And so I expressed in my prayer that I want to be grounded, so direct me to where I need to go, In the Yogananda tradition, there's a prayer that, Lord, I will reason, I will will, and I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right thing that I should do. So it's this kind of idea that, the divine is working through your intelligence, but you have to employ it. You can't just sit around and wait for the miracles to happen. So to answer your question, no, I did not have this kind of divine vision of, Krishna coming saying like, hey, come and do this. But it was actually a much more subtle and ultimately much more empowering. At the end of the day, now I can look back and say, wow, if I'd had some crazy experiences, I might have gotten lost or attached to those kinds of experiences or pigeonholed the divine into that kind of experience. But that development of listening to my own intuition and being forced to engage with the world, the outer environment as it is, that was really helpful. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I have two questions, I suppose. The first is, how did you support yourself during that period? Did you have anything to fall back on, or were you really hand to mouth? And the second thing is, what did your practice look like at that time? Evidently, you're doing quite a bit of meditation and perhaps postural yoga too. What was your sort of practice regime in that period?
Yeah, I mostly was hand to mouth. I had a job all throughout my undergraduate and a little bit of support from some student loans and a little bit of support from some inheritance, but for the most part, I was on my own, but it wasn't too demanding. India, I got very lucky. I was, it's much more affordable over there, and especially at the time that I went. And some of my student loans, which would have, been eaten up by the class tuition at the American campus, could just be used for traveling in India. So that kind of supported the 9 months of travel in India. And then coming back, I had all kinds of different things. I mentioned being a baker. That didn't really work. I ended up working on a couple different farms. That it didn't end up working. I went back to a different bakery, just trying my hand at kind of ordinary skills. And that was important, like there's some just life stuff, like can you show up on time and like get along with random people? That was all necessary character development. So nothing to say negatively about that. And then what was your other question?
I was asking about your practice regime.
Oh, yeah. So, honestly, I was all over the place. I mean, when I lived in the Yogananda community, when I was 20, 21, they had a very disciplined get up at 6, meditate for 2 hours, go to work. After the end of the day, meditate for 2 hours. On Sundays, we would meditate together as a group for like 6 hours. So I lived there for almost a year. So that kind of instilled some sense of discipline. And I kind of kept that going for another year or so afterwards, but reducing everything. It was like an hour in the morning, maybe 30 minutes in the evening of meditation, specifically Yogananda's Kriya Yoga pranayama techniques. And after my India trip, very difficult to maintain a discipline when you're traveling. And so I kind of just threw it to the wind and just tried to say, look, if I can do the bare minimum of my pranayama exercises every day, that's enough. And I kind of succeeded throughout India. And so, I mean, when I came back, I would say I was like meditating like 2 hours a day with the Yogananda pranayama techniques. I mean, they have some different Kriya Yoga exercises. There's a technique called the Om technique where you listen to the sound of Om, but it's like something that's mentally chanted. You actually like plug your ears and chant the sound of Om within you and try to listen to that. And, I never felt nothing. I always had a little bit of experience, energy, clarity, mental peace, this idea of kind of like attunement, but I also never had like the most crazy meditation of my life kind of experiences. It was always just doing the little bit I could to keep going. I always kind of hoped that, well, maybe later in life I'll have my real like sadhana period. And so I don't know if I did or not, but we're still hoping it'll come.
So, presumably during this time, you're doing a lot of reading and other experimentations?
I mean, I studied a little bit of everything. I had like a whole side quest into Hassidic Judaism, learning a lot about Kabbalah. I was really into Orthodox Christianity, so the mystic saints, basically anybody that displayed mystical consciousness, the light in their eyes, miracles. I was pretty interested. Vajrayana Buddhism I avoided until later in life, but because of the theistic thing. But I read pretty much anything that I could that was a book about a saint, Hindu saint, Christian, Catholic, Islam, even shamanism here and there. I didn't quite find great resources, but I wasn't looking too hard either. And I mean, I kind of prided myself on being an expert on all of the different Hindu gurus, like anyone that you'd heard of, I'd read their book, and if there was somebody living that I could meet, I had tried to go out of my way to meet them, So, of course, Amma, the Hugging Saint, she's played a huge role in my life later on, but at the time, she was just another one of the bunch, like Maharaji, the Neem Karoli Baba tradition, the whole Kirtan community. I could just rattle off the list, Siddhi Yoga, Muktananda, and I would print out all their pictures and like laminate them. In my room, I would, my old pictures of my rooms in college, were just wallpapered, like kind of like the background here, but like way more, like just, hundreds of pictures of every single saint or something, hoping that one of them would activate that kind of experience that I was looking for. I researched quite a bit, and I got a lot from it. Yeah, I mean, the Judaism foray really, without going too far off in this conversation, it really opened up my sense of service to the world. It really helped to open up my development of compassion for my fellows. The yoga practices and Yogananda's descriptions of these ascetics, who you could see their ribs and stuff, I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. Like, I don't want to talk to people. Like, I want to just like be in the mountains and blast off. And then, certain aspects of Judaism really opened me up to this. No, it's about serving your community. It's about really serving other people and integrating this kind of realization into benefiting people, and that was a big shift for me. So yeah, so all of that happened in my undergraduate period, and it's a huge thanks to my religious studies department at the Humboldt State. And then I had some excellent professors who were also quite well-rounded, who encouraged that development.
Fascinating. So what happened next?
So then I ended up at this yoga master's program, Loyola Marymount, and I kind of continued on the same track. The program itself was a little bit new, was a little bit unstructured. This kind of mixing. It's very difficult to take something where you're going to be studying rigorous Sanskrit and all of the memorization that is needed for understanding like the physical body of yoga, and trying to understand the intricacies of yoga philosophy, all kind of for people who were not necessarily coming from a religious studies background. So we had people in my class, from age range to myself, which I was like 25 at the time. We had, somebody in their 70s, and it was like a huge range of people. Not that age is really the factor, but some people had backgrounds of being art majors and just trying to take an art major and force them into Sanskrit, all of the yoga muscles, structure, nervous system structures, and yoga philosophy was like too much, in a 2-year program. So it was really ambitious, and I can't say how it succeeded for my colleagues, but for me, who was already quite motivated, I was able to use the resources of the program to do some pretty interesting stuff. So the big moment for me happened when I met this saint. Her name is Amma Karunamayi. And so she is from South India, and this is not the Hugging Amma, it's a different one. And a friend of mine had told me that she was coming through town. So they have a darshan, where you go up and you meet the saint and they give the blessing. So I went to this thing. And because at the time, like I said, I want to know if there's a saint in town, I want to have the connection. I want to see what it's like. I was like, I'll be the authority to see if they're enlightened or not. So I went to this event, and I'm sitting in line, and it's like kind of moving up, and then right as I'm the next person, the line stops, and they say Amma's going to take a break right now and give a talk about her ashram in India. And I was like, oh man, like, come on. So I got to sit here, because if I'd even been a couple chairs back, I would have put a shawl in the seat and gone and taken the break, But because I'm like right there in front of her, I didn't want to be disrespectful and like leave during her talk. So I just sat there for an hour, and then they resumed the darshan. So one thing that this Amma kept saying was she kept talking about her ashram in India as being like a Narasimha place. And this was interesting. So I was familiar with Narasimha. So Narasimha, as I said in the beginning, is this lion form of Vishnu. So if you're just a new student to Hinduism and you start looking around, you're like, okay, like there's Krishna, there's Rama, then there's another guy, Parashurama, and Shiva. All of these are like humans, Then you're going to encounter like Ganesh, Hanuman, and then you go farther back, you got the boar, the lion, the turtle, the fish. And like for a Western person, you're like, well, obviously that's not real, right? Like that's like obviously just like mythology. And so that's kind of, I'd like written it off, as mythology. Again, I can connect with the human enlightened masters, but there was no way really that my logical mind could accept a lion form of God. So even with all the magical thinking that I'd been introduced to before, to really believe that this was like that this actually existed, this lion head deity, that was like, I couldn't quite go there, So Amma's talking about Narasimha in this way as if he really is like a real presence. And it did something to me. Hearing her talk about Narasimha in this way kind of activated something, and it planted this idea that like, wow, maybe there it is real. Like, I don't know. I think it was more of a subconscious thing, because I really had never heard somebody ever refer to one of these beings. Maybe Hanuman, but like, I don't know. Even that was like, I don't know, but this Narasimha thing, just the way that she spoke about it was like, wow, he's real. So one of my practices at the time, I guess I should have said this earlier. So after my India trip, at this point in my master's degree program, I'd had a couple more trips to India as part of the school. We had like a month in Delhi, and then we went to like Rishikesh and stuff. And then I spent some months there on my own. And in that time, I'd picked up the habit of chanting this 108 names of Vishnu or Shiva, alternating, And I wouldn't say that it wasn't like, again, it wasn't like this huge awakening thing, but it was subtle, because I'd been now at that point, I'd been practicing Yogananda's Kriya Yoga methods pretty relentlessly for, at least 5 or 6 years. And now my ability to use those techniques to like encounter life situations, I hadn't quite, my proficiency in the meditation techniques was not catching up with the reality of my problems in life, like emotional problems, relationship problems, all that kind of stuff. I was not a skilled enough meditator to be able to take care of that. So I started to incorporate pieces of the bhakti tradition that I got from India. So this is the 108 names. And it wasn't that they really did that much for me, but they did kind of like, I don't know, I felt like if I did the 108 names in the beginning of the meditation, my meditation was a little bit more juicy right from the start. I didn't have to sit there for 30 minutes kind of sitting around like wiggling before I kind of settled down. It was like, oh, hey, we're starting this meditation off with Shiva, So anyway, what happened was I was somewhere, I was visiting some friends, and I was at their house. I went to do my regular practice of the 108 names, I got my phone, and for some reason the link is broken for the 108 names of Vishnu. And so I see on the sidebar like 108 names of Narasimha. And I was like, sure, like why not? Let's do something different today. And it was like one of the most potent experiences I'd ever had at the time. It was like it felt like Narasiṃha was there in the room with me, like this feeling of presence that it was unbelievable. And one of the things that stood out for me was one of the 108 names of Narasimha is Yogananda, Yoganandaya Namaha. Like I was like, what is that? Like I've never chanted that before. And so, but this like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like bliss, but it was an intensity, and it was like something had been activated. It was intoxicating. So for the next 3 days, I was in this like, whoa, I'm into Narasimha now. Like, I don't know where this came from. And I was kind of also attracted to it because it was new. I hadn't been, nobody's talking about Narasimha. There was, in all of the different teachers coming from India, the different Western teachers, this was a fresh thing. So there weren't like a lot of imprints already previously established. It was like, oh, this is my thing. And what really sealed the deal for me was a week later, I discovered that weekend that I had done that initial 108 names was actually the Narasimha Jayanti, the annual holiday of Narasimha. So then I was like, whoa, like that's really cool. Like maybe I had a past life with Narasimha and he's like coming in and showing me that I have a connection, So that was a shift. And so I tried to do Narasimha stuff that from then on a little bit, something every day, just finding different prayers, different mantras online, and incorporating that into my practice. And I didn't have any really kind of, um, I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I mean, I could have, if I had really wanted to, I could have like probably looked for an initiation. I could have looked into the Vaishnavite tradition that worships Narasimha. But I was quite content with my own yoga practices and just incorporating what little bit from the internet that I could pick up. And so then fast forward, that was like kind of halfway through my 2-year yoga master's program. And then so for the last semester, we had to go and do some kind of like thesis research project, so it wasn't like we didn't have any class, it was just all research. So the bright idea came to me, why don't I just go to India for that? Why am I spending $1,000 a month on rent for classes that I'm not even taking when I could just use that in India and like do whatever I wanted, And particularly so I can go to the Kumbh Mela. And this is what I have this is why I have so much gratitude to my university, because I basically told them like, can I go to India instead of like being here? And they didn't ask for any kind of like written statement of proposal. They just said like, sure, like that was it. Like I just had complete freedom to do whatever I wanted in India. And so, yeah, I went and to the 2019 Ard Kumbh Mela. So this is not the full 12-year cycle. This is happening on the 6-year cycle. It was like a half Kumbh Mela. And at the time, the India reported 30 million people on the biggest bathing day, which at the time was the largest gathering of people. So even though it was the half Kumbh Mela, it was still quite a huge turnout. And I stayed there for a month, and my main objective was to interview the yogis, the babas, about their experiences, especially like ascetic stuff, like like keeping the arm up in the air and never taking it down again, because in the West, in America, we have this idea that yoga is about mental health, balance, peace, calmness, integration. Whereas these guys are like lunatics, like these guys are not the image of balanced individuals. You have to be pretty much crazy to do this and never take it down again. But that's yoga, that's yoga in its own context, So I was interested in seeing like what are they getting from this, and I was completely overwhelmed. Like it was rough. Like I was not prepared for that level of India. I mean, I traveled there 3 times and I thought I was an expert, but just that many people, that lack. I mean, there was some infrastructure, but like the hygiene, the food, the bathrooms, the spraying of this mosquito stuff in the air, people coughing everywhere. Yeah, it was really, really rough. And so in that moment, I was confronted by the reality of my fantasy meeting, reality, this idea of like, oh, I'm just going to go and interview the Babajis. No, they don't want to talk to me, or if they do, they want money, like a lot of them wanted money, or they wanted the clout that comes from having a white guy sitting around their dhuni, So I didn't know how to handle this, because I'm sure there's some great yogis at the Kumbh Mela, but I couldn't sift out the one great guy from all of the thousands of randoms, And I didn't speak Hindi. I didn't have a translator. It was like, what are you doing, So in that moment, I just made a decision. I said, I'm going to research something else for my thesis, and I'm just going to use this Kumbh Mela, because I'd already preset, I'm going to be here at the Kumbh Mela for a month. So I said, I'm going to research Narasimha instead and use the Kumbh Mela as pilgrimage. And that was probably one of the most important life decisions that I ever made. Yeah. So if you want to interject here, here's another chance, or I can keep going.
Let's keep going.
Okay, so just to backtrack a little bit, during my experiments with the different Narasimha mantras from the internet, I had an interesting dream experience. It was not much, just a fragment. Because so this dream thing that I did when I was younger, the lucid dream thing, I don't write the dreams down in a diary, but I have now a quite established dream recall. It's like nightly I get some kind of information. So during this master's program, when I'm experimenting with these different Narasimha things, something brief, about the mother of Narasimha, like what? And I wake up with like the mother of Narasimha, like what's that, So of course I search on the internet, mother of Narasimha, nothing. And so, okay, well, I don't know. It's a weird dream, And then later I was doing a different school project on Kali, and I found some strange article that was comparing Kali to the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet, who is kind of presented as like a lion-headed Kali. So it's a super wrathful, lion-headed. I was like, lion head? Oh, that sounds familiar. So I look into Sekhmet, and I'm like, well, does Sekhmet have a son? Sure enough, in Egyptian mythology, you have Mahesh or Apadamak. I might not be pronouncing those right, but this is basically a lion head male that's holding a sword and a lotus. Very similar iconography as Narasimha. And that kind of was like, ooh, like that's interesting. Like maybe the mother of Narasimha is actually the lion-headed Sekhmet. And I didn't, there's no scholastic evidence to prove that link. And I looked, on the internet, I don't know, maybe there is, but I didn't find, it's too straight, like India and Egypt. Obviously there was a cross, but, so that was kind of an interesting idea. So that thread of thought, though, got me thinking about Narasimha, because in the corpus of Indian texts, there's so many stories about any number of the deities. Like, okay, Krishna, there's like hundreds of different stories about things that Krishna did. Shiva, like thousands of different stories. The goddess, like there's so many different stories. But the Narasimha story, there's just one, and it's very brief. He comes in through a pillar of rock and rips apart this king, demon king, they say, and, kind of like leaves his bloody body there and then pieces out. Now, that's a very abridged version of the story, obviously. I'm leaving out a lot of crucial details there, but basically, there's just this one version of Narasimha killing this demon, and that's it. There's no other Narasimha. There's no explanation. Like, so, like, is there a realm of lion-headed people? So Hanuman comes from a race of monkey people. Ganesh, there's a very clear story how Ganesh gets his elephant head. But there's no explanation for where this lion head guy comes from. It's like he kind of pops in, from another dimension? Like from another planet? Like from somewhere else on Earth? There's no... So I was like really intrigued by the lack of information on that myth. So that is what I wanted to do. That's why I was interested in studying him. So when I was at the Kumbh Mela and I was like, I need another topic, I'm going to study Narasimha, because I wanted to get a little bit more breadth on the myth. Maybe if I went to some temples, I could interview some of the priests, and maybe get a little bit more information. So it was this kind of Egyptian tangent that opened up this idea of like maybe there's more about Narasimha that I'm missing. That kind of motivated me at the Kumbh Mela to to make this turnaround of my thesis project. Okay, so there's a crucial moment at the Kumbh Mela. I got super sick. It was an accident, but not really an accident, but I ate some prasad, the blessed sugar stuff that had been contaminated by the Ganges water. And I knew that it was probably not safe, but I kind of tried to have this attitude like the Indians believe that this is the sacred river, so I'm just gonna go for it, like I just have to have faith, magical Ganga, she's not gonna make me sick. But I knew that I could get really sick by eating this. And so sure enough, that night I was like completely just puking, diarrhea. It was not a good situation. And I'm living in like a straw hut, like I had some medicine, but it wasn't the right one. And then I went to like a pharmacist, but like in the middle of the Kumbh Mela, I just went to the Green Cross tent, down the road, and they just gave me something. They didn't explain the proper plan for the antibiotic. So like, my symptoms improved for 2 days and I stopped taking it. And then it came back antibiotic resistant. So it was a really rough like initiation, So basically in this feverish, sick state, I had probably one of the most significant dreams of my life. This is like this is just one of those moments that'll be in my book or whatever if I write one. So in the dream, I was it was like a fever dream, so maybe that was a little bit more vivid for that reason. But so in the dream, I'm in the Yogananda organization, and I get tired of it. I'm like, this isn't my place. I don't need these teachings, And I got in my car and I drove to Northern California. And as soon as I got to the rivers of Northern California, we have up in the northern part of the state, it's a lot more forested, right, from Humboldt and everything. And as soon as I got to this river, it was like in the dream, the sun, the birds, the hawks were there, the river, everything was just like the Pure Land. And I like got out of my car and fell to my knees and was like, this is it. This is the promised land that I've been looking for. This is like the paradise that I've been searching for my whole life. And I finally found it. It's here. It's right here. Like, I don't need to go to India. It's not in India. Like, India's too dirty, Like, this is the spot. And then it like hit me. Oh no, like this is a dream. I'm in India right now. Like, I'm in the Kumbh Mela right now. I could not be in a more opposite environment than this. And so it was like, okay, well, that was my lucid moment. So then it was like, well, I better pray for a sign. Since I'm here, I've woken up within the dream, let's ask for a message. And so it was like, Lord, who is the architect of every reality, please, like, give me a message. And then my attention was drawn to something on the other side of the river. It was like kind of like a bear. It looked like a polar bear. And so I'm kind of, like zooming in on it. Like, what is this thing coming out of the rocks? It's a polar bear. That doesn't make sense. And then I said, no, this is not a polar bear. It's covered in like a white dust. It looks like a bear, but it's like covered in this thick, like white, like chalk, like it came out of the ground. And so I'm fascinated by this like creature. So it comes and it crosses the river, and now I'm like kind of in front of it. It's kind of in front of me. And it's the craziest thing that I've ever seen in my life. It's like ancient, like so old and wrinkled that it looks like it shouldn't even be able to move. It's like hobbling, like using it. It's like barely, and it's blind. I can somehow tell that it's blind. So the creature it's like got this crocodile face and this crocodile tail, something kind of like a lion's mane, but it's about the size of a bear, and it's got very strange texture on its body, very bizarre. And it's kind of blind, crawling up to me, like sniffing me. I don't know what it's doing, and I just kind of like, bop it on the head a little bit to like, hey, And then we have this standoff. It's like, like it's this like reptile, you know, and I just say, Jai Shri Narasimha. And it raises its clawed hand in blessing and says, Jai Shri Narasimha, you know, and then I start chanting the mantra, the Narasimha mantra, and the whole field opens up, and it's like the portal opens up behind this creature, and we go through the portal, and there's the face of Narasimha as wide as the sky, flaming. It was like amazing, incredible. And I'm reaching out to touch the face of Narasimha through the portal, and like right as I touch it, you know, I like wake up. It was unbelievable. And I'm just laying there in bed like sick. I can't process this creature. What is this face of this animal is like in my head, like what is that? And so I'm sitting there, I can't even get out of bed, and then at some point this friend of mine messages me, and he's like, hey, like, you know, a month ago you told me about some Egyptian thing with a lion head. Like what's the name of that deity, and can you send me a picture? This is talking about Sekhmet, you know. So like I go on my phone and I'm scrolling, and there it is, this exact creature that I saw in the dream, standing there with Sekhmet. And so that is basically called Ammit, which is this jackal, lion, crocodile, hippo guardian that you meet at the gate of death when your heart is weighed on the scale against the feather of virtue, ma'at. And if your heart is heavier, if you're not worthy, your heart gets fed to this creature and transmuted through whatever. And so it was like, it was like, I felt like that was crazy, you know? So then I'm almost in a samadhi. It's like a fever samadhi, you know, where I'm like, having this awakening almost, this kind of like maybe past life, I don't know, like Egyptian, like the Narasimha Egyptian connection is real. Like how can I explain that? This creature that I've never seen in my life, you know, maybe when I was a kid in a book, you know, but that's imprint was long forgotten consciously. How could that arise like that and lead me to that face with such a vision and a potency at the Kumbh Mela? And so it was like so amazing, you know. So that sickness took me like the entire trip. I was in India for 4 months. I was sick the entire 4 months. But a couple days later was like one of the big like bathing days, you know, because they have these big days when everybody tries to get in the water because it's astrologically auspicious. So I was kind of like too sick to go out or something, but I was in the canteen, you know, where we're sharing food, and there's another couple there from America, elderly couple, and I'm sick, you know, but we're making basic conversation, and I say, yeah, I'm trying to research like Narasimha. And they were like, oh, like you would love to talk to our son, you know, like he wrote a book on Narasimha, like he made a documentary about Narasimha. And I was like, wait, is your son Dhruva? So like there's this expert in the field of Narasimha research. His name is Dhruva Gorik. He's in the Hare Krishna community. And I'd heard his name kind of like whispered around as like this legend, you know, this American guy who wrote this book and made this movie, but I couldn't figure out how to contact him. And here I am in front of his parents, and they give me his phone number, and he's coming to India in like 2 weeks to like lead a tour group to like all of the holy places of Narasimha. And it was like the universe just like opened up for me and like gave me this contact. So like all of a sudden, like the Kumbh Mela ends, and I'm headed down to South India to meet up with Dhruva, and we become instant friends. And he takes me on the most incredible pilgrimage, you know, through Ahobilam, and then all of this, which is like one of the main Narasimha places, and then all of these different temples. You know, he gave me a statue, like a murti, and you know, by the end of that trip, you know, I'd probably visited like 25 Narasimha temples, you know, which before that I'd visited none. So like they're not really on the main track, you know. If you're not looking for them, you're probably not going to get them. So I was suddenly like, I'd suddenly gotten something by the end of that trip. And that trip ended at the ashram of Amma, the Hugging Saint, Mata Amritanandamayi. She was not a planned part of the trip, but when I got there, it felt like the place I was supposed to be. And so basically, this is now the end of my trip. So I'm like going to go back to the US in like a couple weeks. And I think I had like maybe a week after my return before I had to write my thesis. And at this point, I'd written 0 pages. So I was like going to write it all in 1 week and then turn it in. And I was very frustrated with my lack of academic scholarly evidence. Like I'd had this amazing Narasimha pilgrimage, this amazing like Kumbh Mela experience, but I was not very academically, I hadn't really discovered anything, And so I went to Amma, and if you go to the ashram, you have to take your darshan, and I went up there with this list of questions, like, where is Narasimha from? Like what does Narasimha mean? Like, what is Narasimha samadhi? Like, what are the different forms of Narasimha? And, they were like, you can't ask all these questions, this is not like satsang hour. You get like 20-second hug, And I was like, no, please, like, this is for my school. Like, I don't know what to do. So they said, just give the paper to Amma and she'll look at it, And so the next darshan that I had, like 4 or 5 days later, I can't really tell exactly what happened, but she gave me a Narasimha experience, which was profound, very profound. And I'm sorry, I wish I could tell the details, but like, it's one of those things. But like, it was like the intensity of it. It was not overpowering. It wasn't like I was in like, oh my God, it's in front of me. But it was a subtle installation of Narasimha, a seed of Narasimha within my heart, And that moment was really when I was like, okay, Narasimha is real for sure. Like, I don't know exactly how. I didn't really get my logical, my intellectual questions answered. But whatever Amma just did to me, that's real. Like, this is real now. And almost in that moment, I realized that this whole thing had been a setup. The whole yoga studies master's degree, the whole coming to the Kumbh Mela, everything had all been to get me to this moment of getting this Narasimha seed from Amma, because I never would have gone down that road had I not invested in my spiritual life in that kind of way, Like, it's such a strange and random topic, just how, like, when looking back on it, it's like, how did those series of events unfold like that? But in that moment, it was like, wow, like, I don't know if anybody's even really asked Narasimha, Amma for Narasimha stuff before. Probably not foreigners, So it was really significant. And when I came back and wrote my paper, I just wrote whatever my experience was. I just like wrote like 100 pages about my India trip and justified it with like some scholarly stuff. And, I got a passing grade and graduated, but at that moment, I was not thinking about school anymore. I was just thinking about how to move forward with this Narasimha energy, like what I'd like. There still wasn't very much of a foundation for how to integrate that into life, but that was kind of like, that was what I came back from my master's degree with. So yeah, no, that was huge.
Wow, that's fascinating. And presumably the reason you can't talk about it is because it's some sort of secret. Is that why? Or is it because it can't be expressed in words? I mean, I wasn't quite clear as to why you couldn't talk about it. It's fine if you don't want to.
There's different perspectives about this. I'm quite open sharing a lot of things, but it's like when you share the really big experiences, it's kind of like there's an opinion that, not that something is lost, but it's kind of like, you want to keep those really secret, precious experiences maybe a little bit closer, just so the power and the impact of them doesn't get dispersed through sharing it, like maybe I say it on the camera and then all these people think like, well, maybe he's making it up. And then their thoughts actually have an effect, a ripple effect on my consciousness. It's like, I don't need people to think about the inner experience, So like just something like that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's your prerogative, of course.
Yeah.
So is this when ayahuasca came in? What happened next?
So, all right. So basically, this whole time I, had this marijuana experience when I was younger. I had maybe 2-month, 3-month usage of it. And after that, I kind of gave it up and I was like, I am in yogi mode. I subscribe to the yogic idea that consciousness altering things are not productive for the most part. I mean, through Yogananda. And, I avoided psychedelics. I avoided intoxicants. I didn't really smoke, like here and there. And I was quite militant about that. It was like there was no excuses for that. I was really focused about sobriety, that was what it was required of me. So this Narasimha download, this Narasimha thing that I'd just gotten from India, there was no way to integrate that. My original intention to do the master's program was to hopefully develop some kind of skill that I could use to become like a yoga teacher. Narasimha is not, that's like, what is that? So like, how does, like, is there a Narasimha yoga? No. Am I qualified to like teach people the mantra? Like, no. Do I really know what it is? Like, not really. So, thankfully COVID happened. And so it kind of relieved, obviously it was a serious, tragic event, but for me it was quite positive because it took the pressure off needing like a place to go, And in the interim there, so from the 2020 beginning for the next couple years, I actually took a side road into Vajrayana Buddhism, and so that was a completely different story. But I went really deep with Garchen Rinpoche. I took refuge and had a lot of experiences, and suddenly kind of activated this like Buddhist past life samskara, where I was now really, really feeling dialed in with Tibetan Buddhism. And I think probably because before that moment, I probably wasn't really able to comprehend non-dual philosophy. But at that point, after my studies and everything, I was able to have it make sense. How do you have an image of a crazy deity and at the same time it's not a deity? So we can get into Buddhist philosophy another time. But basically, so I took this side study of Tibetan Buddhism and kind of put the Narasimha stuff on hold because I didn't know what to do with it. And I ended up living in a Buddhist monastery out in Arizona it's called the Garchen Buddhist Institute. And I ended up basically working there as a kitchen manager during COVID and having a lot of personal time with the Rinpoche and some of the other practitioners while it was closed. And that afforded me an incredible opportunity to study another tradition and practice a path, which is basically a path of mantra that has a very, very well-established formula of nundro, of purification, whereas with India Tantra, that kind of pathway is not as well-defined, or it's not, at least not very accessible. You can take initiation, but it's... So anyway, so I did the Buddhist stuff for a couple years. And then it was like one day, I'm out in Arizona at the Buddhist Institute, and it's a beautiful place. You can see like the mountains. It's called the Flagstaff Mountains, the San Francisco Peaks, or the Kachina Peaks. And then you can see like these painted kind of cliffs of Sedona in the distance. And one day it almost just like clicked in my head. I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm making these prayers every day to these Tibetan deities of the mountain, of the river, of the forest, like in the smoke offering context. I don't even know anything about the local tradition. Like how I'm not getting my siddhis, I'm not getting my magical experiences yet because I haven't acknowledged the ground that I'm on. And it was like, that mountain over there is like one of the most sacred mountains for all of the tribes in all the surrounding states. And I don't even know its original name, like how can I, like, you think the local spirits are going to grant me empowerment and cities and magical experiences when I don't even connect with my own land? What happened to the original shamanic stuff? And so that thought almost like triggered, like, is like the domino effect of life to suddenly come in and start providing for me. And so it was like less than a month after that I had the opportunity to sit with an indigenous peyote ceremony in the Huichol tradition, the Hikuri tradition. And I was super nervous and not really sure if I should do this. But, I had a couple kind of like auspicious dreams or something. And I said, let's see, because I've tried yoga, I got the seed of Narasiṃha, but it didn't really do anything. I studied Buddhism for like a couple years. That didn't really do anything. Like now I'm basically in my 30s, and I still don't have anything to my name. I don't have any practical skills. I haven't had the kind of enlightenment experiences that I hoped I would have had. I'm pretty much broke, like, what am I going to do? And wow, psychedelics really filled in that gap. And so basically, this peyote experience was like, wow, one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, that I'd had at that point. It was, my heart opened. It felt like I'm like in this molasses of love, and this feeling of familiarity with that dimension. And, I had an experience again with this hawks, like from my childhood. It's like the nature came back to me and was like, Jensen, we've been waiting for you this whole time to come back to shamanism. Like, this is always what you wanted, remember? And it was like, wow, like I came home, like this feeling is what I've been looking for my entire life. This feeling of this, whatever this is, this other dimension, this other connection. And so that experience was completely positive, and then after that, I was completely incapacitated in my other mantric pursuits. It was like right after that I had like this month-long Buddhist retreat, and I was like, I did it, but I was not having fun because I was just craving again this beautiful, craving isn't the right word, but I just couldn't forget how impactful this heart-opening peyote experience had been. And suddenly this idea of just sitting in a box and chanting mantra was like not doing it for me. I was like, and I kind of had like, that's kind of a masculine way, the peyote's kind of like feminine way, whatever. That was just what I was feeling at the time. But so then it was like, okay, I did the peyote, now I got to do it again, but that wasn't available. So I tried the other mescaline plant, which was like San Pedro, and that didn't quite do it for me. I mean, it was beautiful again, but like, I was like, I want to kind of go deeper, And then, that shaman introduced me to Yahe, which is this Colombian ayahuasca variant. And I thought, yeah, everything's groovy, like, up until this moment, like, everything in my life has just kind of unfolded like naturally. Like, I guess I'm just destined to do this Colombian ayahuasca stuff, and that's probably gonna show up and be this amazing, beautiful thing. And it just completely wrecked me. It was like the most, 0 to 60 in an instant, where I'm like just praying, pleading to whatever is happening at the moment, don't drive me insane. Like, I cannot handle this. Like, the fragmentation of my consciousness was too much for me to bear. I had never in my life had that kind of, just that immediate, just like suddenly no reference, of self. And the feeling that I knew that I would come back, but I didn't think I would come back the same. And I was afraid of not coming back in the same timeline, whatever that means. So that experience was traumatic, but the trauma of it was kind of like a challenge. Like, what now? So now you're just gonna be afraid of this from here on out? Like, you just, you were everything was cool, and then you hit a speed bump, and you're just gonna now just like not come back to this and just like write it off, and just the rest of your life you're gonna have a story about how like you got scared in an experience and you never did it again. Like, no, you got to go back and face it. Like, what about your Narasiṃha? Like, what about all your stuff? Like, you got to go back. And I really didn't want to go back, but I did, and confronted it, and I didn't have the same as intense of an experience, but I did kind of reconcile that imprint. And so those early experiences kind of formed the foundation. That was the beginning of what opened up for me with the jungle, everything coming out of the Amazon, because I didn't really go back to that group, that Yahe group, but those initial experiences kind of left me with okay, there's definitely information that I can get from the psychedelics that I cannot get otherwise. And I need, I feel like a pressure spiritually, like I have to do this. Like this is really interesting stuff. Like I've not had these kinds of experiences from anything. There's more here for me. But there was also a fear, because it was like, I don't know if this is safe. I don't know how this fits into the cosmology of everything I've read, like, I don't know, like Amazonian traditions, they're praying to what? Like they believe in what? I don't even know if they fully knew. It was kind of like, are you really going to trust your consciousness over to this nebulous, plant or whatever it is, because in each tradition they have a different idea about what it is. And so the answer was yes, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna go through it, So basically that began a 2-year period where I experimented pretty much as possible with ayahuasca, predominantly through these Catholic syncretic church called the Santo Daime, and then also the indigenous tribe called the Huni Queen, coming from the Amazon jungle. And, these experiences were so incredibly profound. In the beginning, I was, just every ceremony, every time that I drank, there would be this deep healing, this somewhat like almost like a visiting of an aspect of either my upbringing, my relationships with my family, or my relationships with nature, that, when I got there, when I got to that place, it was like just showing me this thing that had been in front of my face the whole time, like, oh my God, this is why you've been blocked here, or like, oh my gosh, you had this relationship with the birds this whole time, or you had this relationship with the trees this whole time, or your grandmother, who I didn't really know, her work, doing the best that she could, enabled me to be here today through my father. Like that never had made sense to me before, and I was feeling it in the ceremony in this like very, very lived way, and felt like that was releasing through me, and it was it was like blissful, And the other incredible thing is it was the sensitivity induced by the psychedelic state meant that all of these mantras that I had memorized, I could suddenly feel their impact on my body immediately. Whereas before, you're sitting for hours trying to do a mantra, and maybe you felt like a tingle like halfway through or something. It's like the moment that you start doing it, you feel the presence of the mantra, And so I had so many beautiful Narasimha experiences through the ayahuasca, because I was practicing that mantra, that particular container allowed me to explore my mind in that direction. And it was so profound, because it was like, finally, for the first time, I felt like I was connecting with the mantra, like I hadn't connected soberly before, not like this, but this is like, wow, like it's this powerful, transformative presence. It's like unbelievable. And then the ceremony groups that I was sitting in were allowing me to share with the group, so then I would share it, I would sing it on the harmonium, and then the validation, the feedback from other people, like, wow, I went to this, I saw golden, it was like a validation of that, and so it was so beautiful, so I can continue, but if there's anything you want to jump in and ask here, feel free.
What kind of frequency of journey are we talking here? Weekly, more than weekly, in this intense period?
As often as possible, which oftentimes was once a week, every weekend or every other weekend, so yeah, like minimum 2 times a month, doing something, if it wasn't an ayahuasca experience, it was experimenting with some other psychedelic, there was this voracious appetite to experience every kind of plant possible, and there were no. I didn't hear it. Nobody was telling me any warning signs about not mixing different plants. I've since learned, and I'll tell that. But at the time, it was like, yeah, like this is just, it's medicine. It's good for you, and it's from God, so just as much as possible, like, let's go in,
And were you still living at the Garshan Rinpoche place then? I don't suppose this would have gone down very well with them.
No, would not have gone well. So I left, started doing all this stuff, and then I had a brief trip to Pakistan for something else, studying, doing a Buddhist conference there. And then actually I started a job working in the National Park Service up in the Trinity Alps in Northern California. So I was, park ranger basically in the Forest Service. And it was a great job because it was the timing, the schedule was kind of flexible, seasonal, and allowed me kind of longer days off to be able to do these ceremonies. And my job was directly interfacing with nature, so it was like a perfect environment for me. Yeah. Basically, just to, because now we've introduced quite a bit of moving parts here. So, I'm a yogi, a Yogananda yogi who got a huge Narasimha experience, who then went off into Tibetan Buddhism, got familiar with non-dual mantra practice, learned a bunch of mantras there, then went on another left turn into the realm of ayahuasca. And at this point in the story, this is, my whole time in the plant medicine world, I would say, is about 2 years. But at this point, I'm about 6 months deep. And I've been doing it as much as possible, predominantly with the Huni Queen tribe. And at this point, I have not had a single negative, really, besides that initial one that I referred to. Everything else has been like nothing but unfoldment after unfoldment after unfoldment. And, I could take this entire podcast to describe one of the psychedelic experiences. So obviously, for brevity's sake, I can't go too much into the details of all of them. But, people familiar with psychedelics are going to understand that, they're a quite powerful experience for many different reasons. So something inevitably, broke. Like, you're pushing this hard. And this is, I'm at, the mind is a delicate container, and, I'm, like, to go from doing nothing into now just like every weekend piling whatever I could into that, and this is not just the ayahuasca, but like basically anything that I could get. And I was especially fond of this tobacco snuff called hape, that they administer through these long pipes, and it's like, not only is this tobacco, this is kind of like one of the most important spiritual elements for the tribe. It's something that is kind of imprinted with their magic, and it just, after this 6 months of experimenting with the plants, I'd almost completely forgotten about my yogic aspirations. I had almost completely replaced my personality with this kind of like ayahuasca character. And of course, I still had all of the mantras, of course, I'm still practicing the mantras, but now they're kind of almost like an afterthought. Like that's almost like the things that I did just to get me to this point. And now all of a sudden I'm like interested in learning about the indigenous chants. I want to learn the indigenous language of the Amazon. I want to learn how to play the instruments to carry the musical lineage of the ayahuasca, and now I'm suddenly finding, this is really what I was seeking my entire life, when I was a kid and playing World of Warcraft and wanting to be a shaman. This is it. I finally got there. It wasn't the yoga that was taking me there. It wasn't the Tibetan Buddhism that was taking there. This is taking me there. And it was right in front of my face the whole time. This is from the Americas. Like, this is why I was born in America, maybe, and I had this elaborate idea, maybe in my past lives, I was in India, I did all that stuff before, and I intentionally incarnated in America so that I could have this opportunity, kind of a precious, valuable opportunity. The percentage of people who've experienced, Brazilian ayahuasca is not high compared to the globe. It's like, yeah, like I really felt like this is now I've come home, But what happened is just one experience went south, and all of a sudden I was being attacked by sorcerers in some other dimension who were trying to drive me insane and steal my life force by driving me insane. And I could not shift out of that reality. And the ceremony did not wear off the way that it usually wore off, where, it was a common theme to have some kind of fear, to some kind of blockage, and then, at the end of the ceremony, it's kind of transformed into bliss. It's like, oh, I'm feeling a blockage around my father. Oh, now it's healed, and now I sing and dance, and everything's feeling good. This time, it was like, oh yeah, you're being attacked by sorcerers. That's it, and I couldn't shift out of that reality. And now all of a sudden, my waking and my dreaming states are not that distinct anymore. And it feels like a fog or a layer or a presence. And the shamans who I've been sitting with and the people that I'm sitting with, they're not really able to offer the kind of support that I needed. They're kind of like, well, it's part of the process, or like, trust the medicine, brother. It was like not, I was like, no, like this is weird. Like, like suddenly I'm destabilized, and I didn't know what to do. And so, the suggestion, of course, is like, maybe you should take a break. But when you take a break like that, this is going back to this trauma imprint. Suddenly I have this story. I have a story that I hurt, I went too deep, and now I like broke my brain, and now I'm like scared of ayahuasca because I don't want to go back to that place. And I could feel that story, if I didn't address it immediately, that story was going to crystallize into like my mind, that was going to become my reality. At this point, my reality is amorphous, it's like I'm drinking so much like ayahuasca, like, I don't know, I maybe could shift out of it. So I felt like I have to keep going. I have to keep doing this. And so I'd put down a deposit, on one of these weekends, and it was like, I didn't really want to lose, whatever, $600. So I just said, like, let's go for it. But I'm going to do it differently than I've done it before. I'm going to go and I'm going to pray at Yogananda's tomb before going. And I had been given a cloth, from the tribe, and it was orange. And so I went and I offered it to the president of the Self Realisation Fellowship, and said, please, I'm offering this cloth on behalf of the tribe. Anything that's been given to me by the tribe, by the ayahuasca, I'm now offering to Yogananda through the organization. So please, look, I'm sorry if I made a mistake in opening up this plants, but like, I don't want to go crazy. Like, I really want to be like a good devotee, so please help me, and I'm going to do this ceremony. So please help me that I don't go crazy. And this ceremony was so profound, and it was completely different quality because I hadn't realized how much I was just jumping into that space and assuming that I was going to be familiar there. You don't go to another country and then just walk out into the jungle like without any knowledge of what's going on. That would be foolish, So the same way, you don't just walk into another dimension and just stumble around and open up doors, that's not practical. And you don't just like throw yourself into it with reckless abandonment, thinking that you know that space and that, when you say the prayer that you're the shaman, that you can do it. Like there's a process, there's a training, everything. And so for the first time, I wasn't approaching the ayahuasca as like a wannabe shaman. I was approaching the ayahuasca as me, with my background of the different yoga stuff and the Buddhist stuff and the Yogananda stuff, and I had a line drawn. I'm not willing to compromise on my relationship with these other things. Like, I know that I have Narasimha. That Amma experience was really important. The Buddhist experiences are really important. The Yogananda experiences are important to me. Those are off, you can't touch that, off limits. So ayahuasca, I'm happy to learn and see what you have to offer, but, you can't touch this part of me. And suddenly so the realization was, yeah, you've been approaching ayahuasca asking everything from it. You've been asking from ayahuasca everything, and therefore ayahuasca is now asking everything from you. So if you can refine your sense of boundaries, and if you very carefully limit what you ask from the plant, then, you might find your mind stabilizes. And so that was a very significant spiritual maturing in my life, because suddenly the experience addiction that was unknowingly taken place had kind of solidified, and it's no longer about having just this mind-blowing, colorful, whatever experience or this whole healing journey. It's not a magical healer that just takes you all the way to enlightenment. It's a force that has a unique context, which at the time I didn't understand. I still don't understand it really, but it was like, okay, I understood more, like this is a plant that comes from a cultural tradition that has its own entities. They're not just like giving like free healings, it's not just like a free barbecue, like there's an exchange that's happening, and it's a reciprocity. And so if you're giving them everything and saying, they're going to take that, because you don't not approaching it correctly. But if you can approach it more, respectfully, then they will approach you more respectfully. And so I began to kind of settle in to that and clarify my understanding about what is it that I really want, really, like you're doing a lot of different things, you're learning a lot of different energies. Now I've got quite a collection on my shrine of different spiritual energies, but what is it that like I'm really after? And when I was honest with myself, I would say that it's my guru. Like I want to meet my guru. I still want to just meet my teacher, and that was definitely the right answer, because that's a very humble, it wasn't too ambitious, and that allows for a lot of kind of twists and turns in the process. And so I didn't quit. Basically that realization made me uncrazy. I kind of restabilized myself again, but I had a completely different outlook. And so I still would go to the ceremonies. In fact, I maybe at this point did even more, because I could handle it in a different type of way. So I didn't slow down, but I changed my attitude in a way that made it like integrate a little bit better. And is this, just to pause here, is this light a little bit Should I pull the screen down?
If it's bothering you, then we should change it. But
it's fine for me if it's fine for your camera.
No, visually
stuff.
it's fine, yeah.
Okay, sorry to interrupt there.
No, it's fine. We can cut that out, no problem.
Okay, so, oh, geez, for continuum, I should keep this on. All right, you can edit that out. Okay. So, anyway, this ayahuasca stuff was really interesting. And so, in the mix of all of this, somebody gave me ayahuasca for my own. Up until this point, the only times that I've done this were in a group capacity. And I was approaching on the anniversary of this Narasimha Jayanti, and I wanted to do something special. At this point, it was kind of like my personal tradition. Every year I want to do a little special Narasimha thing in my own way, as much as I'm able to connect. And so it was kind of like, wow, like, could you do Narasimha ayahuasca thing, like, alone? Like, well, maybe, yeah, like, let's see. I've done it quite a bit, like, why not, you know? So all the conditions came together. It was one of these really lucky moments where I had a place to do it, a house that someone lent me, kind of a consecrated place, and nobody was going to come, and it was like free reign, and I'd set up my huge shrine with my statues and everything, and, you know, planned it all out so that I would be drinking the ayahuasca at the exact moment of the Jayanti celebration in India. And I had some unique stuff that I did. So I did this for the day before to prepare. You know, I did like 7 or 8 hours of practice. You know, and at that point, just to catch things up to speed, always in my life I had been I had a devotional quality, a bhakti quality. And music was a part of that, you know, but it wasn't a big part. But one thing that had come out of the ayahuasca was using a lot more the music to activate certain parts of me, and particularly a kind of spontaneous style of taking like a harmonium and singing really kind of like inspired poetry that just kind of came up off the top of my head. It wasn't, but it was a form of prayer, you know. So I had found that had opened up some dimensions for me. So anyway, leading up to this solo ceremony, I do this like 8-hour prayer session, you know, where I'm like pleading on Narasiṃha and all of them, like, look, I don't know if this is the right way, but this is just what happened. Like, I was born, if you truly are God, you know, if you truly are the great Narasimha, then none of these twists and turns of my life should surprise you. It was always destined for me to have this meeting of ayahuasca. And, you know, either this is an acceptable means of worship of you, or it's not. And if it's not an acceptable means, then that's all the more reason for me to worship you, because then I need your help to get out of it, you know? So it was like, either way, I need to come and like kind of like lay this ayahuasca stuff at your feet, you know? So I started by doing this process called abhishek, which in India is where you pour the sacred substance, the milk, the honey, the ghee, the water over the murti with mantra. And so I started by pouring the ayahuasca over the murti with my mantra, and then drinking what came off of that. And it was a very profound experience. So, you know, as the night came on, you know, and the experience got deeper and deeper, it's not, for me, I'm not like a super visual guy, but this, I could feel like the presence of Narasimha, like he was like riding on this snake. Actually, this image that's behind me, this is the Sudarshan Narasimha. This is a very, very unique form. And I guess I could bring it into view a little bit better, right? Was that something that you would like?
We can see it quite clearly actually behind
Okay,
you there.
so
Yeah.
there's a snake here, and then he's sitting in the meditation position with a yoga belt, and then he's got four hands, and each one is a protective disc, and this is a very unique form called Sudarshan Narasimha. And so this statue came after the experience, but in this ayahuasca experience, I could see Narasimha, I could feel Narasimha sitting on top of the snake. Here, this is the Naga king, but in the ceremony, the snake was the ayahuasca, and he's sitting on top of the ayahuasca, and he's laughing, and he's rolling on the flow of the force of the medicine, and with his hands, he's spinning these wheels of protection that protect from how do I say this? Like, from the thought pathways that would result in like bad trips, basically. You know, like at any moment, you know, in that force, you're so open and you're so vulnerable, and your your channels are like open, you know. All it takes is one fear. All it takes is one thought that could potentially set you down the pathway. And from previous experiences, right, I'd learned, yeah, one pathway can spiral into a fear that could lead into something else. And so Narasimha was this like guardian, you know, this like guardian of that altered domain. And he's like protecting from these alternative timelines or these alternative thought lines that would result in fear or a lower auspicious, you know, a less auspicious experience. You know, it was beautiful. It was like really fascinating. And then we get to this point, and so at this point I have my harmonium in front of me, and I'm singing. I don't even remember exactly what I was singing, but some kind of like personal devotion. And I was like, look, like you're flirting with me. Like I've experienced you. I've learned your mantras. Like I've memorized. But really, like I still don't know you. Like, did you really just come to me in the Kumbh Mela through the form of an Egyptian deity for nothing? Like, was that like what was the point of that? Like, was that just like a once-off experience for me to like never return to? Like, and then all of a sudden, that crocodile creature is back, Amit, in a completely different context now. It's not a visual presence, but it was absolutely a presence, and it was not old and ancient, and it was not blind and crippled. It was powerful, it was youthful, and it was intense. And I stood up and I rang the bell, you know, on my puja table, and I had a little flame to do the arti offering, you know, and I felt the presence of Amit, and she said, "Do you have the key?" And I said, "Yes, I have the key." And the key was the mantra that I had said in the dream 6 years prior. And I recited the mantra, and she said, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Take me to Narasiṃha." And suddenly I got the feeling that I was going to pass out. And I was like, I don't want to pass out. I never pass out, really. You know, like I'm always a little bit. And it was like, oh, it's too strong. It's too strong. And I can't, like, I don't know what to do. Because up until that moment, the Narasimha mantra was always the mantra that grounded me when I was going to pass out. And this time it was reversed. The Narasimha mantra was making me pass out, and I couldn't undo it. And so finally I had no choice. I had to go lay down and just accept it. And as I'm laying there, you know, getting this Narasimha mantra like blown into, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. The world, it felt like a golden spaceship landed in my third eye, and like the noises and the light and it was so intense. And as I get close to finishing this mantra, it was so intense I felt like my brain was going to explode. And then I finished the mantra. I say swaha, and it's like, and it's gone. The intensity is gone, and I'm like stone cold sober. And it was like, what was that? The intensity of the intensity to straight to sobriety. Like for a second, you know, I thought, like, did I die? Like, am I in a different, like, where am I? And it was jarring and it was bizarre, and the night did not necessarily end on like this beautiful integration feeling, but it was definitely not uncomfortable. It was like, that was way more powerful than I thought. Like, I didn't know that that was gonna like, that's really interesting, you know. So that was really interesting. So from then on, now my experiences, so this is like May, you know, so like I'm still drinking ayahuasca every weekend. That this didn't really like stop that, but now there's like a different theme in my ceremonies. Like, you can't forget an experience like that. Like, it's like, I didn't, now like this Egypt thing came back, you know, and it was like, I don't, again, like, I don't know how, like, it's another powerful experience that I don't really know how to integrate, but like, I definitely like want to keep diving into this. Like, I definitely want to figure this out, you know, like, what is this? So, you know, I'm doing ayahuasca, and finally I decide, I think what I need to do is a dieta, you know. So the dieta process is where you go, and it's different for each tribe, but basically it's like a month, you're not really eating salt or sweets or really eating much food at all, and you're like not drinking water. So your liquids are coming in through a kind of like a mash fermented thing, or like tea. They've loosened the restrictions some places. But anyway, I wanted to do like the initiation, because it was like, look, like all my other practices, my mantra stuff, my Buddhist stuff, you know, none of that has really taken me to where I'm being taken through the ayahuasca. And this feels interesting now. Like, this concept of doing abhishek with the ayahuasca, like, this is, I think that I could keep playing with this, you know, and like, if it's taking me into like really Narasimha territory, that's exotic, you know. This is now interesting to me. But it was hard for me to put my finger on at the time, but all of a sudden the stakes of my life had like gone up a little bit. Like, after that kind of that intense experience, it suddenly felt that I was now a little bit on a line, like a razor's edge of maybe actually going crazy. Like, before was like maybe like the prequel, you know, but this was like, you know, look, you are like, if this is correct, if these experiences are true, you have to take a lot of caution here, because you don't know what an energy from ancient Egypt is. Like, maybe it's Narasimha, but like, you don't really have the container for that. Like, if that existed in Egypt, that was in Egypt. Like, now you're in Northern California, like, or Narasimha, like, you don't even know Sanskrit. You don't know really, you don't have the protection of a lineage. You know, there's not like a guru who told you to do this. This is kind of like your own little side project, and it's very interesting, but this could like blow up in your face. Like, you know, if you, from my books, reading all these wizards and stuff, you know, you got sorcerers who have things blow up in their face all the time. And so I kind of felt like maybe I'm getting into that category. And so that's why I wanted the dieta, because I was like, the dieta is going to establish me in an ayahuasca lineage and make this stuff a little bit more safe. Well, what had happened to me over the course of all of this, ever since, so this Narasimha thing is like May, so then June, July, August, the dieta's in October, September, October. I'm still drinking ayahuasca like 3 or 4 times a month. Like, it's a lot. Like, I mean, it's a lot of money, of course, but thankfully my job was able to kind of like manage that. But in terms of my emotional, mental capacity, I was like really scraping the bottom of the barrel of my like spiritual potential. And I was basically running on this hape stuff now, this tobacco stuff. You know, I was quite, you know, 4 or 5 times a day, because that was what I felt was kind of grounding me and integrating all of these different pieces of these different energies. Because if it was only the Narasimha thing, maybe I could have handled it. But, I was also having like crazy Buddhist experiences, crazy. And then there's like 3 or 4 different ayahuasca traditions that I had my hands in. And I'm still doing San Pedro on the side. It was like really a lot. And so they were asking the money for me for the dieta, like, 2,500 or something, and I said, just give me another weekend, like, just I like, hold on a second. And basically, there's different tribes in the Amazon, like, so the ones that I was involved with were the Yawanawa and the Huni Queen. If you look at it from the outside, it looks almost identical. They got similar clothes they're wearing, similar feather crowns. The chants are in similar Panoan language family, but cosmologically they're quite different. And I was kind of working with both, and I didn't understand the contradiction at the time. But basically I was going to do a dieta with the Yawanawa while I was predominantly sitting with the Huni Queen. And what I've realized now, like years later, is that was causing a friction, between tribes that traditionally may have been at war with each other, killing each other, in the jungle. And I'm like trying to handle both of those energies at the same time. And basically what happened is I was in rough shape, and I was about to go and like give the last bit of my life force to this Yawanawa dieta. And I sat with the Huni Queen in this weekend right before I gave the deposit. And this is kind of now the build up, this whole thing. If you recall the story I already told, the one where I realized my boundaries, the one where so it had now been a full year since that experience, and so that particular shaman and that particular circle I had not sat with for the whole year, because they do these tours, so he comes back around again, and suddenly I'm back in the same space where the ayahuasca had asked me a year ago, what do you want, like, and shown me this insight, about boundaries and about giving it all. Like, suddenly I was back in that context, suddenly about to give it all again in the dieta, and it was like the spirits of the lineage of the Huni Queen like came out of the ayahuasca and said, this is not your path. Like, we love you, but quit. Please, for the love of God, quit and like never come back. Like, this is not your path. Your path is India. Like, you are not doing the ayahuasca. You are not doing the dieta. You are not doing the plants. Your path is Narasimha and the dieta. And is the Narasimha in India. No dieta. So it took me it was a 3-day weekend, and it took me 2 nights for that message to like click, that like, after whatever happens on this 3rd night, you're done, like, for real. Like, you've been pushing full speed. And it was, these 2 nights of getting that message, it was pulling, smoky entities out of my ears. It was pulling things out of my hands. Like, it was showing me the toxicity of this tobacco that I was addicted to. It was showing me that my habits had been completely out of control, that I'd been on this knife edge of sanity, and that I was about to basically spend this bit of my life force, last bit of my life force, by going to the jungle, And so it was all leading to the 3rd night of this ceremony. And it starts out, and I got my little Narasiṃha Murti statue with me, and I'm talking to him as the ayahuasca kicks in, and I said, please, like, show yourself to me, show yourself. And I love you. Like, this, like, I don't know what to do. Like, this whole thing has been about this, like, Narasimha. Like, I don't even know how I got. And the statue opens up, and it opens up with a mantra, and I recognize the mantra. It's a Vishnu mantra, and it was not a specifically Narasimha mantra, but I start practicing it, and I start practicing it at like light speed, like just doing as like just constant repetition, super fast in my mind. And all of a sudden, like I felt like my consciousness became one with the mantra. And suddenly the distinction between my identity, the mantra dissolved. And it's kind of bizarre to describe, but like I accessed the consciousness of the mantra. And suddenly from that standpoint, I was no longer Jensen. I was the mantra itself, the deity that is contained within that vibration, that frequency. And from that standpoint, then I basically I could see my whole life from the perspective of the mantra. And it was like, don't worry, Jensen, don't worry about going crazy. Like, I've been here the whole time, And then it showed me, like, somehow myself as the mantra remembered creating the ayahuasca tribes. Like, it showed me when it created the ayahuasca tradition, because Vishnu, technically he's not the creator, but he's the sustainer. His presence is permeating everything. And so it was almost like I could see like on a graph, like he was like, you want to see like what spiritual level this ayahuasca tradition is at. It's like here, and like, here's like the Yawanawa, here's like the Huni Queen, whatever. And then it was like, you want to go and see what's at the top? And then I go all the way to the top, and like the fractals open up, and it's like, it's Vishnu himself, except he appears as the Egyptian deity Amun Ra. And it's like, this is now like totally crazy, like I don't know how to make sense of this, but like, it's Amun Ra. And basically in the meeting with this energy force, it was like I'm Vishnu, I'm Amun Ra, I'm everything, but you see me as Amun Ra because you had a past life in Egypt where you made a connection with me that was so deep that you basically, and you committed to like continuing that worship of me. Like you continued, you had like an agreement that you were going to carry on some kind of work. And that's why you're born. Like that's like why you're here. Like you were born to do this. You were born to carry out. And basically, Narasiṃha is the manifestation of Amun Ra. Basically, is what it said. And it was like showing me that you have an agreement that you were going to come back and you were going to do this Narasimha stuff. And if you continue with the ayahuasca, you're going to use that karma up, and it's going to go to the snakes of the tribe instead. I don't mean that negatively, but they worship snakes, like it's not meant for that. So you have to like basically quit this, And then the scene kind of changed, and it was Yogananda. And like, I'm not so identified with this experience that like I think that like this is like true necessarily. Could just be a reflection of my subconscious or whatever, but it's interesting still. And there's Yogananda, and he basically said, he's like, I don't condone ayahuasca. Like it's not safe. It's kind of dangerous. Most people like lose their path, but he said, because you've recalled this piece of information about Amun Ra and the Egypt connection, you're going to be able to benefit like so many more people. And so because of that, I'm going to help you to like work out your karma with this, of everything you've done leading up to this point, like all the crazy ceremonies that you've sat in, he's like, I'm going to help you to deal with that because you took on more than you realized when you did all that stuff. But please don't do it anymore. Please stop. And the final piece of this vision is that I heard throughout this whole thing, there was like a voice in my ear, and it was like whispering, like, as it was in Karnak, as it was in Thebes, so it is again, and I was like, I don't know what that means, but I remembered it. It was like consistent the whole night. When I came out, I looked up, what is Karnak? What is Thebes? Well, Thebes was the main capital of Amun-Ra of the New Kingdom, and Karnak was the Amun-Ra temple of Thebes. And so it was pretty clear that, yeah, you were probably there in this past life thing in Karnak. And sure enough, if you read it on the Wikipedia, I think you can find it. The first depictions of Amun-Ra was a man with a lion head. Later, very quickly, it started to change to like ram's head. Sometimes he's got human head. But some of the first depictions were Amun-Ra with a lion head, And so I don't really have more that's quite a bit, this is like serious, Vishnu, Amun-Ra, Narasimha is very interesting. So I came out of that ceremony and it was not easy, but I quit, I lost some of the money that I'd put down, and I didn't go on that dieta, and I pretty much just cold turkey quit everything. And I went to India instead. And in that India trip, the sensitivity that I had developed to energies and to the mantras throughout all of the psychedelics opened up a new type of experience in India, before, 6 years prior, when I'd gone to the temples and they were doing their mantras over a candle or a flame, for the offering, I was like, come on, that's not doing anything, But after having done so many psychedelic experiences and having felt the difference in the energy, in the astral, that comes when you light a candle or put the candle out, I knew, no, energies respond to these ordinary gestures, these chants, these mantras of power. And so I was suddenly able to access an entirely new dimension of India. And the kind of the cool thing that it all came back around full circle was this money that I was going to give for the dieta. It was like burning a hole in my pocket. So I asked my friend, my old Narasimha expert, that guy Dhruva, I said, look, there's this form of Narasimha. He's sitting on the snake. I really would love a statue of that, and I have the money. And he said, that's so crazy that you said that, because I just had one custom made, and the carver made a second one, like a double. I didn't ask him to. He just made it. And I asked him why. And he was like, I don't know. I got inspired to, So that money immediately went for he's like, Jensen, that's definitely for you, And so that's how I ended up with this Sudarshan statue, this Sudarshan Narasimha statue. And it was like, yeah, I had to fight through that ayahuasca period, the psychedelic period, to get this understanding of Narasimha. And so now that was all happening like 2 years ago, like 2023. So in the following years now, to kind of bring this full circle, I went back to Amma and I kind of symbolically offered all of this stuff at her feet. Not just symbolically, I wrote on a paper saying, I offer this to, I'm sorry for all of the plant stuff, and now I want to do the Narasimha thing. Please direct me to, I said, actually, specifically, I asked her, give me the siddhi. I want the siddhi, the spiritual power of Yoga Narasimha. I want to understand what that means. And in a bunch of different ways, she gave me the name Sudarshan. So my name in the Amma community, in the context of India, is Sudarshan. There's many circles where I go by Sudarshan. And but actually, through this, the chain of events, that I could never predict, I ended up getting the full presidential scholarship to go to GTU this PhD program, and the application, my research topic was basically, I want to research Yoga Narasimha, this aspect of Narasimha that nobody has ever really explored, the Narasimha who's sitting with the meditation belt. And they loved it, and they were like, yeah, take the full scholarship. And so, within 6 months of asking this prayer of Amma, never even thinking that I would end up in a PhD program, suddenly like everything just came full circle. And now I found myself, in this rigorous academic program where I actually get to explore, research like what siddhi means, what the siddhi of Narasimha means, and all of these very fascinating aspects of Narasimha that are I would say, almost lost, And the journey to get here has been, nothing short of this wild, like I almost kind of like lost it, But now, and if I had one like takeaway, this is it, like if you're somebody that wants to learn about Narasimha, for example, like one of these like niche aspects of the deities, if you're not born in that culture, your approaches are limited. I'm from the West, so like I don't have that many ways to plug into Narasimha, like there's a lot of people that worship him from like this cultural background. They're born into those communities. They go there to the temples from being a kid, and now they grow up and they keep worshiping him. But that's very difficult for me to plug into for many different reasons. I don't speak the language. I don't have this built-in understanding of how an anthropomorphic deity can be real. And then there's so that's one way of accessing. And then the other way pretty much is like through a pre-existing like guru tradition. So for example, the Hare Krishnas worship Narasimha, but they don't really like if I like Narasimha, but I don't agree with every aspect of their philosophy, then it's kind of like a mismatch, And so those are kind of like the few ways to plug in, And so like what I was interested in, especially because of like Tibetan Buddhism, where deities are symbolic representations kind of more for aspects of enlightened mind, I'm kind of approaching Narasimha in this different way. Like what is a lion head aspect of the divine, And now what he represents in India is kind of this like remover of obstacles, but it's not really remover. It's more of kind of like protecting from ghosts sometimes. Like if you feel like you've had black magic done to you, like Narasimha, you can do like a Narasimha homa, a yagna to like protect, that's one of his qualities. Because Narasimha is the Sudarshan, which is the magical weapon of Vishnu that he has on his disc, his hand. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that for me to learn about Narasimha, the best way was for me to basically like lose my path. And then now I understand who he is by having been brought back to the path through him. As opposed to just reading in a book and then like repeating it because of like, oh, the book said so, like Narasimha is the great remover of obstacles. And then people ask me like, well, what obstacles has he removed for you? And I'm like, well, I don't know, like, some invisible stuff, I guess, But now I can say like, no, I almost lost my mind. Like I was about to do the dieta. I was going to be like the ayahuasca shaman, all kinds of influencing factors. And Narasimha just like reached in and with exacting clarity was like, no, this is your path. This is your mission. And this is what I represent. This is what Narasimha is. It's the force that puts you back on the path. And that's what takes us back to that, what I saw in the ayahuasca when he's got his different balls protecting you from the wrong thought paths. He's a lord of time. He's the lord of protecting you from timelines that are inauspicious, and now we're getting into something interesting, and so that's kind of now what I'm getting into with my PhD research is tantric versions of Narasimha, where he is, actually associated with, primordial it's like Vishnu is divided into these vyuhas. He's like 4 different building blocks of reality. And one of those vyuhas is Kala, which is time. And Narasimha is considered to be, in the literature, an incarnation of time itself. Narasimha is not an embodied avatar like Krishna. He's not. It is a true avatar when God actually just comes in, just straight through the fabric of reality to reset the balance, because this demon was so intoxicated with his power that Narasimha, had to reset the timeline. And how did this demon get his power? Through Soma. It's one of the Puranas that we don't talk about. He got his power through Soma, the psychedelic. And so suddenly my journey with, activating my power through the ayahuasca, but not really having that power be like correct, and then being reset by Narasimha, unknowingly I was participating in an archetypal unfoldment of Narasimha itself, And so now I kind of understand, how these Puranas are allegories for the unfoldment of our experience, So that's kind of like the complete thing. I can go back into aspects of that if you want.
Presumably you don't drink ayahuasca anymore. And I'm curious about, perhaps you do, I'm curious about how you view those experiences. For example, you mentioned in this sense of being persecuted by sorcerers. Did you ever get some kind of resolution for that? And how do you view the ayahuasca more broadly?
Okay, occasionally I drink ayahuasca still, but it's with a lot more maturity. And it's like with this, like if it's not 100% yes after I've checked in with everybody, then it's a no. And so in the time since I quit, I've drank twice, so compared to like 4 times a month, so that's a big difference. And I'm still integrating those experiences, compared to the original when I would not give any time in between. This is tricky, this is kind of like what our time is this time of the planet is working through, especially in the Western culture, is the access to these different plant lineage technologies, and in one sentence, I would say the ayahuasca is a gray area. It's neither good nor bad. It's definitely not a medicine. It's not a medicine. It's a plant. In the same way that plants, yes, nature can be medicinal. There's also poisonous plants. It can also be a poison. So you have to be mindful if you're in circles or in communities where people are saying, "Oh, it's perfect. It's medicine. Trust the medicine." No, it could be poison. It's not. To just give yourself over to it is not definitely something that I recommend. But for me, there's many different classes of psychedelics. First of all, the synthetic stuff like LSD, DMT. Also, I don't even touch that. If it's made in the chemical synthesis, that's a little bit out of my purview. That's like kind of distilling a plant and adding in this kind of scientific. I'm not sure if the alkaloids are meant to be worked with like that. But when you're working with like a ayahuasca, like lineage, I'm trying to figure out, this is a complicated question because really I personally am yes, absolutely there are many, many different dimensions. I think there's a Bible passage, it's like, in my Father's house there are many mansions. There are many different levels of reality. for sure. And nobody really is disputing that. Like maybe no, yeah, Christianity is full of demons and angels and all this stuff. Everybody kind of at the most part agrees that there's many different dimensional channels. And so I think, looking back, I think Yogananda, like certain pranayama methods are actually to bypass the channels and go straight to like a liberating awareness. You're like, a lot of that is not really necessary for human beings. Like these different channels of reality are largely for many different classes of beings. In Buddhism, there's like 6 classes of beings that inhabit, so you can have many different types of incarnation, So, consciousness can incarnate as a snake spirit living in some other channel, and they're going through whatever they need to go through in that realm. But there is something, and this comes from the Dharma traditions, there is something unique about the human body, that the human birth, the preciousness of the human birth, is its capacity to transcend its humanity and become enlightened. And so with the unique chakra system of the human spine, and we actually have the power to kind of alchemize, to transmute our physical bodies and therefore our consciousness to actually become source itself, which I believe, according to, my source, which is largely Yogananda, but some of the others, that's not really capable of the other entities. It's harder to do that leap from embodiment to enlightenment from, say, the snake spirit realm. And so, humans possess, an extraordinary array of extraordinary potentiality, extraordinary capacity. Now, I think that there's with the psychedelics, with this ayahuasca and so many other of these plant lineages that kind of open the door to these other channels, there's the capacity for kind of like a borrowing of power. These entities, or this by expanding your consciousness into this other channels, you're developing your psychic power, your astral power, and maybe unconsciously or even consciously making a contract with the particular force, and an astral force that's going to loan you some of its force. And what we don't consider usually is the exchange, what's in it for them, so this idea about like a ayahuasca that's like healing you, like, why would the plant want to heal you? Like, because it cares about you? Like, because it like loves you or something? Like, why would it love you? Like, actually, like, especially me being, I'm descended from the colonists, like I'm from Europe. Like I'm guilty. I'm receiving the fruits of the desecration of the Amazon, like the clothes that I wear, the food that I eat, all of that is built on the structure of destroying the plant. If anything, the plant might want to do the opposite of helping me. Why would the plant just naturally, automatically want to heal me? And so, my opinion is that you just think about it logically, like, maybe there's something that they're getting. And so in Buddhism, they talk about the tremendous merit that comes when you attain enlightenment. At the moment that you attain enlightenment, all of the connections that you have made are automatically upgraded. All your little things that you made a connection to, all your friends, immediately they get like uplifted because they know somebody who's a Buddha. They know somebody, like there's now this exchange. And so this is true not just with attaining enlightenment, but with every every insightful thought, like if you all of a sudden, you've been the meat eater your whole life, you all of a sudden like decide like I'm going to become a vegetarian, there's a tremendous amount of like merit. I mean, I don't know. I'm not attached to dietary. I'm not judging anybody who eats meat, but like there's a tremendous amount of merit in that, because now all of a sudden you're no longer participating in the killing of animals, and this kind of merit, is suddenly like there's like an immediate change, right? So in the ayahuasca, when you're having all of these like realizations at like top speed, it's like all this merit that's like firing off. It's like all this spiritual like food, so to say. And then the experience is over, and like what, you're going to remember it all, or like you're going to integrate it all? Like, no, probably not. And so like I started thinking like, well, maybe there's some kind of exchange where the ayahuasca realm, it's getting that merit, and so it's kind of like similar to the, we all want to be billionaires, but the reality is we're not going to be. So maybe you can have the experience of being a billionaire by working for one who gives you their credit card. Then you can go around and buy stuff, and you're like, wow, like I have the billionaire power, but I'm not actually a billionaire. And so the plants, these ayahuasca lineages, are temporarily kind of like loaning you this capacity to break through. But is the breakthrough real, or is it kind of held with interest? Are they kind of being the middlemen for these kinds of spiritual experiences? And are they taking a cut? Are they taking a fee out of your life force? That's how I've experienced it. And specifically with the Amazonian tribes, who have a deep relationship with the snakes, I was kind of lulled into a positivity about the snakes, because I was not, they're not venomous snakes. They have a relationship with the anacondas and like the boa snakes. And, those snakes hunt very differently. I was like, oh, these don't have to anything to worry about. Like I wouldn't join a rattlesnake worshiping group, but boa snakes, yeah, I like boas. Well, they hunt differently, they like create a very nice, comfortable little cozy container for that animal, and then when that little animal tries to get out, they constrict. And it was like, oh, I wonder if that's what was happening to me. My first 15 ceremonies were these amazing, like, wow, look at the colors and the visions. Then you try to go and you try to do something else, and you can't, because your mind has been shaped by that ayahuasca and that particular road. This is not a judgment on any of the ayahuasca tradition. In fact, I still have a lot of respect and love for those people, but it's just, if you're going to do any psychedelics, it needs to be like really thought out, potential repercussions, and I think if I had one piece of advice for anybody doing psychedelics, please just have a spiritual practice that's different from the plants. If you're grounded in some form of enlightened tradition, it's grounded somewhere. Don't make the same mistake that I almost made by like giving up my sense of identity and becoming like a representative of the plant world. It's like, keep your relationships with the Yoganandas, with the, with the gurus, with the Rinpoches, like, because those are part of your lineage, and if you just give that up and then trying to jump into this indigenous way of thinking, like, there might be the possibility of getting like swept up into something that we're not sure what the repercussions are. And, I think if I had gone down to that dieta, it's not that I would have really like lost anything. But if you're looking at life in a series through an Asian understanding, through a dharmic understanding, I might have lost the Narasiṃha for this lifetime, and I might have ended up just doing the ayahuasca stuff for a life or 7 lives or something like that. Because if it's destined for me to connect with the Narasimha thing, then eventually I will, but might get shunted to another couple lives down the road, and it's kind of a lot to keep incarnating over and over, so yeah, I don't know. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yes, my question was how you see it now, and you've been giving your reflections about that.
Yeah. So occasionally it can be maybe helpful. if it's bookmarked with, appropriate consideration of all of the potential aspects, and, supplication of one's deities or teachers, really honest, asking, what am I doing this for? Why am I doing this? And even with that, understanding that there may be consequences and you may be on the hook for those consequences, and that's okay because you made the decision to do it. And yeah, so, I'm not strict on anything. It's not like a black and white, like this is good, this is bad. But psychedelics, because of their capacity to activate at light speed, should be taken with a lot more consideration than I see that they're being taken with now. And I understand why it's happening the way that it is, because I was very much in the same position.
May I ask a question about that? I'm not asking you to justify yourself to me. I'm curious how you justify it to yourself. If you've had an experience with Narasimha, a sense of being rescued, a sense of being clearly redirected to Narasimha and away from ayahuasca, and in fact these elders of the lineage coming out and also telling you never come back. One interpretation from these sorts of experiences would be never do it again. Pursue Narasimha. Don't go back to ayahuasca, yet you have returned. How do you justify that to yourself? How do you explain that to yourself? What is it? Is it for fun? Is it for some nice experiences? Is it a spiritual exploration? Is there more healing to be done, etc.? Are you testing to see if this is really the message? How do you rationalize that to yourself?
There's a line from the Autobiography of a Yogi. Yogananda is with his guru Sri Yukteswar, and Yogananda runs away to go to the mountains. And I think in that chapter, Sri Yukteswar says, forget the past. The past lives of all men are dark with many shames. Human conduct is forever unreliable until they're established, in the divine goal. And basically my justification is like, I'm human, like the idea wouldn't let go of me. Like I still felt like I didn't get 100%, like there's still like something else in that space, like I didn't, I just quit. Like I put so much energy into that thing, and to just have something that you really were passionate about. I mean, in some ways it's like playing an instrument, or, for years I played the piano, and then all of a sudden, like God came and said, stop playing the piano. Like, okay, I'm listening, but like, I kind of just want to play around sometimes, so I mean, really there's the justification is that like, I'm honest with myself, and I assess myself, and I say, have you learned the lesson? Have you are you integrating constantly the information? Like the import that experience served was served. Like I quit, I really did quit. And even though I have done it a couple more times, I'm still done. This is now just the trail end of whatever last bit of karma I have to do, or, if I really, it's like this very rare once in a lifetime thing shows up, I'll do it again. But I really feel like, even though the message was, you should quit, the reality is that like, yeah, you need to quit, but like, it doesn't just happen like that. And this, I'm not comparing myself or justifying myself in comparison, but there is a story about Ram Dass, American Ram Dass, and his guru, Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji, told him, you shouldn't take the LSD anymore. I think this is in that book, Miracle of Love. Stop taking it. And then Ram Dass says right there, like, I took it a bunch more times, and like later on down the road, I understood why he told me to stop. But like, like I still had some karma left, and so I of those two experiences that I did after I quit, they were quite different. And I got the same message that this is not your path. It was like, and one of those was quite beautifully reflected. The shaman actually had a vision so like this is the same thing, a 2-night thing. So the first night's beautiful. The second night was like really dark, like not evil, but just like heavy, just like heavy on my head. Like it felt like physically oppressive. And I just prayed and prayed, and I just felt the presence of Narasimha and of Amma, who gave me the mantra, and all these people, and they were just like, this isn't your path. Like what, like this isn't it. Like you don't need to do this anymore. And the next day we had like an integration circle, and the chief came in the room, and before the whole circle he came straight to me and he said, I had a vision of your deity, and your deity said, this is not your path. Like you don't need to do this. Like this is like, the way he said it was, the deity said that Jensen has a different type of medicine, and that he can drink once in a while on special occasions, but this is like small amounts, but this is not his path. This is not his medicine. And that was really powerful because, that was like the ayahuasca itself. I mean, this was a chief who I had a deep relationship with. And for him to say that was kind of like, yeah, the permission for me to like, yeah, I can quit. And I'm not quitting on bad terms. I'm quitting with connection. I'm quitting with the tradition itself, saying, "Hey, you actually are being allowed to leave." This is not like we were sucking you into our trap and you escaped. It's more like, we recognize that your medicine is different. So you're not doing this because you don't need to anymore. And then the other ayahuasca experience was of a completely different type, and it was actually, unlike all of the other experiences, it was 100% for physical healing. And I mentioned earlier in our conversation, like this tobacco snuff, this hape. So I did so much of that I actually like really like hurt myself. Like I actually like shifted my bone structure, because the air pressure and the muscle contraction and the repetition, multiple times a day for like years, actually like shifted my head. And it was like serious. Like I was having like a lot of problems, like headaches, like dreams of having like tumor, like really intense pain. And from my work with the plants, I understood that, this kind of problem is physical but also spiritual, and is like, because of the way that the tobacco and the ayahuasca are side by side within the plant tradition, I knew that I have an imbalance with the tobacco spirit that is going to be hard for me to address from a place of sobriety. And so I made that choice to return to the ayahuasca with a specific person who I thought could help me to address this tobacco blockage. It was purely for like the scientific healing. It was like, look, this is not me coming back to ayahuasca. This is me trying to just repair myself from the damage and recognizing the potency of this tool. And that actually is, I think, how it should be used and how it was used ancient times in Peru as a surgical tool to help an ayahuasca doctor, a shaman, to identify blockages in the energy that could be healed with certain plants. And actually, it was completely successful. The guy, I mean, like the tobacco problem, this blockage was like more or less immediately shifted, as a result of one ceremony. Whereas I'd gone to physical therapists and osteopath and so many things, acupuncture, and I wasn't getting the healing that I needed. So, I had reasons, but even then, it was each one of my participation I deeply considered, and prayed about, and was prepared to not go to if I received an inward no,
Thank you for explaining that. It's very fascinating. This has been incredible. I think we should talk again. I'm curious actually about your doctoral research, curious about your methodology, how you're conducting your research, how you anticipate that's going to unfold. I understand you're also learning some relevant languages as well. You've begun that process. I'm curious about that. So perhaps, if you're willing, we could have a second conversation and really focus on that project, which you're in the midst of now. I mean, how long have you been doing that? A couple of years now?
The PhD just started this fall, and it's a 5-year program, but we're moving out of the gate at light speed, like I got a presentation coming up in India in May. They're flying me out there where I'm talking about Narasiṃha. I'm exploring a number of different methodologies, ways to research contemplative traditions. So we have...
Great. Well, let's get into that in detail next time. Jensen Martin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another Guru Viking podcast. For more interviews like these, as well as articles, videos, and guided meditations, visit www.guruviking.com.